glucose monitor meter, and all the time I see, after having 2 toast or poha, my sugar went up and then it was down.
It is again one of those typical social media trends. If you are not a diabetic person, you learn absolutely nothing from wearing a glucose monitor. The fact that you eat some carbohydrates, that it will produce a sugar spike, is perfectly normal biological behavior for every living thing on the planet. We believe milk fat turned into ghee is a superfood, but milk protein turned into whey is bad for us. It is ridiculous.
Need to mention something. I started my podcast career, Ashok. It was with Tarla Dalal's daughter, Renu Dalal.
Yeah.
And so I think you have very high regards for
yes.
Tarla Dalal.
Yes.
So she was one of my
Yeah.
favorite. Had a privilege to be with her on dais.
Yeah.
So I think our ladies need to know that.
Absolutely. I think, if you had to name one person, you ask Indians to name one person who made the greatest contribution to Indian culinary history of Indian food, people will say, oh, take mythological name. They say King Nala, right? Nal Maharaj, a legendary cook, and Bhima was legendary. They'll give all those names. And they will forget in reality, and they will name a famous chef. They will name a Ranveer Brar, they will name a Vikas Khanna, they'll name, what is that other UK person, Jigs Kalra and others, many others, right? The famous chefs and all that. And yet, all their contributions pale in comparison to what Tarla Dalal achieved, right? Because people forget. So, Indian civilization, and let us take, say, Sumerian, that's where in the Middle East, right? So that's Iran, Iraq. Both go back 4,000 or 5,000 years, right? Because the people in Mesopotamia and Iraq and that part of the world wrote down things. Okay. We know the recipe for what they cooked 5,000 years ago. Okay. And yet, Indian civilization had a predominant bias for oral tradition, not writing things down. We never wrote things down. So that is why we have no clue what the recipes were. In the last 2,000 years, there is literally one book of recipes that has survived. Manasolasa from the 12th century, a Chalukyan king who happened to write it down. He was a king, he was interested in cooking, he wrote down some recipes. So we know what idli was in the 12th century. So there is that's just one book. But we know what an average person was eating 5,000 years ago in Egypt and in Sumeria. We know because they wrote it down on clay tablets. If at all we wrote it on these reeds, which also did not survive, right? So India is not a writing down culture. We never documented things, right? We forget that all that we know today about Ayurveda, about many of these things, the Vedas, were all documented and collected, edited and published only in the 18th century. And only after the British came, only after a bunch of people, Indians who said, oh my God, if there's one thing we can learn from the British, it's that they write things down in books. And so much Indian knowledge is not available in books.
Yes.
So these were the first people who understood Sanskrit, understood Indian languages, understood English, and were able to translate and write and document. So everybody who's saying according to Ayurveda today is saying it on the basis of an 18th century collection and translation by some Bengali people in the Asiatic Society in Kolkata. Nobody is quoting actual things from 3,000 years ago because we never wrote it down, right? So this is, in this kind of a culture, what Tarla Dalal achieved, because Indian cooking is one of the most richest culinary cultures in the world with so much diversity. Every 50 kilometers, tastes change. Every social strata, the cuisine changes because every caste and community has a different style of cooking and so on. Spectacular diversity. For the first time in history, she managed to get it documented. Why? Not because, she had got a bunch of food science technologists and professors to write it. She got homemakers to email her recipes in the 1990s for the first time digitally and giving them credit. The first time she got all of this stuff onto the internet. Nobody did that ever before. And then now we live in a world where everybody can now go on YouTube and watch someone cook on Instagram and so on. But all of that was pioneered first on blogging by text by Tarla Dalal, right? So her contribution, without her, all of this knowledge of Indian cooking and recipes would not have even got documented. So that she is very, very central to, in fact, my book, Masala Lab, a whole heap of the research, particularly on the vegetarian dishes, and particularly when I was researching the cuisines of Maharashtra, Punjab, a lot of her recipes kind of focus on those things, right? Was by analyzing 50,000 of her recipes, by downloading and then doing some AI data science on that, right? So yeah, so without that, so much of our understanding of this would not have been possible, because see, chefs make restaurant food. Restaurant food is not home food. Tarla Dalal captured what people were making in their homes. Their recipes, their techniques, everything is very different. Yeah. So the way a chef makes a dal makhani is not how you make it at home.
Exactly.
Right? Dal makhani takes 9 hours to make. You order a dal makhani, it comes to your table in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, so the base gravy is made, the dal is already cooked, that guy is slapping some butter and cream together, mixing the whole thing and getting it to your table. That's not how you cook at home, right? So I think that the home cooking, we never had that documentary.
So, remembering Tarla Dalal ji, giving a tribute to her here, and proceeding further, as our page is Women's Social Corner, and I heard you somewhere mentioning that you consider rice as a woman-friendly grain. So I want my members to know.
This is sort of, I think it's a classic social media problem. It was part of a 2-hour conversation in a podcast, in another podcast that has a large audience. And you know how these podcast hosts are, they will cut out that most provocative, interesting thing 30 seconds while leaving all the rest of the context so that will go viral. And it was surprising how it made a lot of people take notice and say, I never thought about it this way. And it also made a lot of people angry, saying that, you're oversimplifying this, right? So I think it's important to, the broad observation was that in India, if you generally see, and across in Asia, right, that rice cultures ended up creating conditions for women to get out of home and into careers earlier than wheat-based cultures, and for no reason other than the fact that you can cook rice in one shot. It's very less time in the kitchen. The average South Indian person spends very little time in the kitchen compared to somebody who has to make chapatis and kulkas and parathas continuously, and people want to eat that hot, and so it has to be, right, it's real time. It's a lot of backbreaking labor, right? On the other hand, rice is very low effort, right? And the rice-based dishes are very low effort. Idli, you can make one shot, right? So many idlis and things like that, right? So, and if you sort of look at India's, what you say, there are some social indicators of women's, how many women are studying, how many women are graduating from college, how many women are going to work, etc. The South and the Eastern states do better. The data shows that they do better. This doesn't mean that rice is why it happened, but among the many other factors, there were social movements, women being empowered much earlier, getting access to vote, a whole other social factors also for sure helped. But I mean, it's hard to ignore the fact that if you have
they did
to only
not spend much time in kitchen,
15
so
minutes
they had
in the,
time
20
to
minutes in the kitchen is an important element of that entire thing. Other interesting thing is, I think some other experts also pointed out that, look, wheat cultivation is a man's job. Historically, pre-tractor and all of that, the way you had to plow the land and the way you had to sow wheat is a very muscularly laborious job that women could not do, so it needed men to do that. Rice cultivation is, have you noticed rice cultivation, men and women both?
Yeah.
It requires women also. So it automatically, first thing it does is that it forces women's participation in the workforce. Although it is in cultivation, you have to do it. If a woman has to then spend so many hours in the field, that changes the nature of how you think about cooking, how you think, how much time you are spending at home cooking food and so on, versus a situation where you're only a homemaker and your only job is to make the tastiest real-time food for the men in your life. It changes that. So you also see patterns where the kind of dishes that we tend to cook in South India and some of these Orissa and many of these places will also be things that you can cook in like 2 minutes. But many of the dishes in Gujarat take like 45 minutes to make, right? And think about something like an undiyo.
I know many houses that have 3 times, roti, paratha, bhakri, chapatis made
Yes.
hot.
Yes, and then 2 side dishes, and then you have some very elaborate undiyo and all takes so much time to make, right? Because my mother herself was working in a bank, had 3 sons, and she would cook an entire meal in half an hour and then go to work. So it's impossible to do that if you are like having to make chapatis and then do all of that. So that was so it was more of a casual observation. Right? I think people took it very seriously, but yes. So it is just, the intent is to provoke you into thinking about how
Things evolve over time.
and not just that, also think about how, in many cases, particularly it's true for men, is that we take the free labor of women for granted, right? And that if you step back and be more mindful about your food, we spoke about calories and being able to really pay attention. Don't just pay attention to the food, pay attention to how it's grown, pay attention to who's cooking the food for you, how much effort it took, right? And then you think about the fact that if using a fridge, if using eating leftovers, if using a microwave, using an air fryer, all reduce the amount of labor and effort in the kitchen, that's good. It's a net positive, right? So I think it is in that sense, right? Yes, I mean it went needlessly viral, but yes, that's.
So, talking about, we just talked about leftovers, frozen food, and marination.
Yes.
So, what does food have impact of all these things? Because normally leftover food tastes better next day.
Yes. Some dishes,
Marinate,
yes.
yeah, some and marination and all these processes.
Yeah.
Please do include fermentation also
Oh, yeah,
in
sure.
the brief of it.
In general, no, I think for most of our history, the single biggest concern most human beings had about food was how to prevent it from spoiling. Because food is very precious. It is tough to grow crops and do that. But the nature of the world we live in, especially in a place like India where it's hot and humid, there's bacteria and fungi everywhere, and they also want to eat the food you have made. So as soon as you cook food and it's cooked, all these bacteria are waiting to try and eat it, right? When it's friendly bacteria that are trying to eat it, and they eat the things that you don't want and they give you a lot of beneficial things, we call it fermentation. When the bad bacteria eat your food, what they do, what the fungi and bacteria will do is that they will produce poisons. That basically is to say, I don't want other bacteria to now eat this. By producing that poison, I am keeping this food for myself. That is where you get food poisoning. Okay. So, and both of these bacteria and fungi exist in the air. They are everywhere, right? So that is why, for most of mankind's history, we've been trying to creatively find ways to preserve food. So we found a lot of techniques. First thing is, keep it in cold temperature. So again, not practical for people in India because there's no cold temperature, but practical for people living in North Europe, right? There, for 6 months of the year, it's pretty freezing temperature. And in many cases, they would just store the food under ice, almost like a refrigerator, right? And then they would take it out. When the ice melts during summer, they would take it out and eat, right? And the second thing they discovered is that salt. The more salt there is in food, the longer it lasts, because salt inhibits bacteria and fungal actions, right? So therefore, we started salting and brining and marinating. Marinating, the term means you soaking it in seawater, right? Marine means seawater, right? So adding salt, pickling, all of these things are techniques of adding salt, where people in Europe, they would do that. So that's the second sort of technique we started doing. So the addition of salt to our food is again an essential part of preserving it. The third thing we found out is that the drier something is, the longer it lasts. Basically,
Moisture
bacteria,
ruins
moisture. So water is absolutely essential for the bacteria and fungi to live and grow. So the more water you are able to remove, at least from the surface, right? So the longer it lasts. So we started sun drying stuff. Vegetables we would sun dry, etc. All these things we would start doing. And the other thing we also invented is that we started deep frying. But what deep frying does is that it keeps the inside soft and it dries the outside. It removes water from the outside. The physics of deep frying is what? You add something to hot oil, which is well above boiling point of water. All the bubbles you see is water escaping from the surface of food. That's the bubbles you see in deep frying. And any experienced cook will know when is something finished deep frying, when the bubbles slow down. Because now most of the water is gone and the Maillard reaction will happen and start browning it, right? So you don't want that to go too long, right? So that's when you have to explain to a new beginner how to deep fry, this is how you explain it. Wait for the bubbles to stop. And at that point, pay close attention because it will become black very soon, right? So you're removing water from the surface. Once you've removed water from the surface, that will also extend the shelf life. That is why in Ayurvedic Indian tradition, kacha pakka food is deep fried food. You can carry it with you when you travel. Pakka food is something that you can eat only, kacha food is something you can only eat at home.
Fresh.
It is fresh, it is boiled, it will spoil. Right? And it's highly toxic if you try to carry it for long distance and things like that, milk and rice and all these kinds of things, right? Whereas deep fried stuff, that's why most of our Indian street food is deep fried.
They last longer.
They last longer, right? All your chaat and all your farsan, all your fafda, all that stuff is basically for the, again, concept of reducing water, right? So it is just that because we have a 5,000 year history and the other technique is adding acid. Acid also inhibits bacteria. So you squeeze lime juice, you add imli, you add kokum, you add amchur. All of these are strong acids. So that will also inhibit bacteria. So any sour dish will also spoil later. And then the last technique is adding spices. Spices are also antimicrobial. The spicier the food, the longer it will last. So it is just that because that's the culture we come from, we have still not adapted to the most powerful way to preserve your food, which is the very first one, low temperature. A refrigerator allowed Indians to do what people in Iceland and North Sweden were able to do, which is to put food under the ice. It allowed even somebody in a hot place like Chennai or Gujarat to be able to do that. We have not adapted to that culturally yet. It is the single most powerful way to preserve food. It does not lose any nutrition. You can cook your food, you can put it in the fridge and eat it for 3 to 4 days safely. In fact, NRIs, and many of you probably have relatives, all Indians, the moment they go to the US, they discover the joy of leftovers, which they never did in India. They will absolutely cook and store because there they have to do all the work themselves. They will absolutely embrace the fridge. They will cook large portions on the weekend, put it in the fridge and eat it for the rest of the week. And it is perfectly fine, right? So food does not spoil, right? And the thing is that as long as you're stored it properly, it's airtight, your fridge is working properly, there is no current fluctuation, power cuts and all that, you are absolutely fine. In fact, Indian dishes are sour, they are salty, they are spicy. That combination along with fridge means that you can store for a really long time. And if you're freezing it, you can store it for months. In the regular fridge, a week is probably a limit. After that, it might start to taste funny. But in the freezer, at that temperature, no microbial activity. You can store things forever, right? So that is why I think in the interest of convenience, it's a great way to embrace that. And also, by the way, I would actually argue, using the fridge is a better way to eat healthy. Because you know why? Not all of us have time to cook fresh food all the time. Okay? What do we do today? The temptation is the phone is right there. Open the cloud kitchen, open your app, Swiggy, Zomato, order dal, order something, okay, you're done, right? Just don't feel like cooking today. Many people do that, right? Most young people kind of do that. Any dal you order from a restaurant has 3 times more calories than the dal you will make at home. Because they will add more oil. There is just, you're a food expert, right?
Yeah.
If a restaurant did not use enough oil, you will not eat at the restaurant. You will find the food to be not tasty enough. But
they have to make it tastier.
But because if they use less oil and another restaurant uses more oil, you will go to that one.
Yeah, you'll find that tasty and
you'll find that tastier, right? So it's market pressures. So by not putting food in your fridge and by not making extra dal and eating it the next day, you're actually eating unhealthy. But you're thinking you're eating fresh food, right? We have to change that idea of what is fresh food. It should be like if you cook it in your home and you put it in a fridge, you stop the time. it is fresh only.
Yeah.
Of course, beyond a few days, etc., it's there. And for sure, see, I think in some cases, like there are dishes like biryani and there are dishes like some of these other more spicy gravies where the flavor improves over time.
Over time, yes.
Right? Because all
Pav
the
bhaji tastes very amazing
because
very next day.
see, the flavor, no, spice flavors happen like like perfume, base note, middle note, and top notes. What you smell is the top note. That's the harsher flavors. They smell good, but they're harsher flavors. In the fridge, all the top notes are gone. So the next day you taste all the middle notes, the ones that are all fat, soluble, salt in your tadka. That's when you taste them. You get the much richer flavor of the spices the next day.
It's amazing. I think we cannot miss out on two aspects. One is millets. Recently, they
Yes.
have come back as a superfood.
Absolutely, yes.
But like
Yeah.
you said, we don't have any
They're
superfood.
grains, yeah,
But
yeah.
they should be included in our diet.
Absolutely, yes.
So how and what do you suggest about
See,
millets?
it's like I think it is about rather than overthinking this. No, it is so a little bit of history is useful because culturally in the past we were not all eating rice and chapati every day.
Yeah. After Green Revolution, I think.
No, a
wheat
little
and
bit
rice.
before, the British actually promoted the wider consumption of rice and wheat because they felt that whenever there was a famine, right, the government had to supply food to the people. And they found that every 50 kilometers, people were eating a different millet. They said, I cannot set up a ration system where I can give you 100 kinds of millets. I can set up a ration system only for wheat and rice. So the British would buy from the farmers only wheat or rice, store it in granaries, and when there is a famine, the government would give you the rice, and they would only give you. So over a 100-year period, we slowly changed people's eating habits to mostly rice because the poor people would mostly get rice and wheat, right? And millets literally became the food of the poorest people who do not even have access to the government, and they are growing millets because millets can be grown in very poor quality soil. They don't need much water. They don't need much fertilizer, right? So they are crops ideal for climate change because rice is extraordinarily expensive to water consuming, high input cost, high carbon footprint, whereas millets are not, right? So from a overall, so I think you have to remember that past, and then as part of your diet, eat more things, right? Rather than eat rice like 3 times a day, 5 times a week, 7 times a week. Do millets twice a week. Try something else, right? Mix and match and eat what works, right? For example, many people find it very tough to digest bajra and some of the harder jowar and all of that. Yeah. But they are okay with barnyard and the other easier to
little
digest.
Millet
Little millet and all of that. So eat what works. Millets generally have more fiber, slightly more protein, but remember they're still grains. So they're not superfoods. They are fantastic from a sustainability standpoint, and they are an improvement over only eating rice or wheat, right? But don't think you'll suddenly become magically healthy because you started eating millets and all that.
Yeah, so variety in food is something that
right. So
millets will help as a
more variety
grain.
in grains, more variety in vegetables. See, the more number of different things, they say, that if you can eat 20 different kinds of vegetables and fruits a week, it's a great thing, right? And a lot of Westerners go, oh my God, how is that even possible, right? And we calculated the average Indian diet, you don't have to think at all. We'll easily hit 20 varieties of vegetables in a single day.
Yeah.
Because you count a tomato is a vegetable, onion is a vegetable, garlic, ginger, turmeric, already 5, and then you have chilies.
Coriander, green
Coriander, curry leaves, already 7, 8 ho gaya. Then you have sabji, aloo, that, this, you're covered.
Covered, yeah. Good number. Little bit, I think when we were talking on fat, we missed out on cold press and refined oil segment. So I think we just touch base.
Yeah. A lot of the misunderstanding nowadays comes from people not appreciating the fact that our population has increased and we've also become urbanized. Right? So when you're living in a village, the way oil used to work is that depending on which part of India you're in, let's say you're in Tamil Nadu, the good chance that the oil seed being grown locally is till. So that village will have a group of villages will have one oil mill where the bulls will be used to crush
ghani.
the
Yeah.
till, and people will then they will give them the seeds. That guy will crush the oil and give you, and you will use that cold pressed till oil in a week, and then you have to go back again, right? So that's historically how we dealt with oil, right? And if you're a dairy culture, you milk your cow, you make the butter and the ghee, and that is how you do it, right? If you're a groundnut part of world like Andhra, you will use groundnut, and in Kerala it will be coconut, right? And so I think it is, and in mustard in most of like the Indo-Gangetic plain, it's mustard. Like
Mustard,
from
yeah.
Punjab, UP, Bihar to Bengal, the entire Indo-Gangetic plain is mustard oil, right?
Yeah.
And so it is just that's how we did it, right? Once we stopped being agricultural and we moved out of this thing, this is not a practical solution in a city, okay? Because once women also started working, etc., cold press oil shelf life is very short, right? Because it has many things that, well, it's good for you, but it also makes the oil go rancid, it will start smelling, shelf life is not high, right? So we then invented the process of saying, fine, let me take that oil after crushing it and remove everything that is not fat, so that I create an oil that can last for months, right? I can give it to you in a larger bottle. You buy it 1 liter, 2 liter bottle and all you buy. Nobody was buying 1 liter, 2 liter of cold press oil back in the day. People would collect a small amount and bring, right? Now you're buying 5 liter,
We have 15 liter trend in Gujarat.
Yeah, Gujarat is on a different planet, but mostly the rest of India is like 5 liters minimum, right? You're buying like 5 liter sunflower oil and all that. The only way to make something like that is to refine it, right? Now, you're losing maybe some of the antioxidants that were present, etc., but remember, you should get that from vegetables, not from the oil. You get much more. See, if you're, like for example, if you have you get a lot of those antioxidants from the vegetables and fruits rather than from the oil. That's number one. The second thing is the fact that cold press oils in India, we've also historically also found out that we have certain vitamin deficiencies. So we have started fortifying the refined oils. All your refined oils have vitamin A, D, E, K, mandatorily fortified. Cold press oils don't have that. So especially if you're vitamin D deficient and you don't consume much ghee, butter, milk, then you have a problem, right? If you only say, no, I will only do cold press oil. So I think the way to think about it is, there is flavor, there is small benefits to cold press oils, but not enough that you will demonize refined oil. It's not necessary. I would just say that use cold press oils if you can afford it, for day-to-day cooking, light, low temperature cooking, and use refined oil for deep frying, right? Because it's a higher smoke point, it won't go bad, right? And if you cannot afford cold press oil and if you find it just too unsustainable, trust me, you're missing nothing. A lot of social media is rich people wanting very badly to tell you that their expensive choices are healthier than your cheap choices. The data and evidence does not prove that. Let rich people spend more money because they feel good about spending more money. They're not getting any additional health by eating only cold press, only this, only that. All of that stuff is only avocado, only blueberry. Amla has more antioxidants than blueberry, so you don't have to. You can, if you're eating amla, you're getting all the benefits that some rich person is getting from importing blueberry from South America.
You being a AI person, computers hardly let people go in the kitchen, but you have done Masala Lab is an amazing book. It's my encyclopedia to lot of things that I want to know about.
Yeah.
And your regular podcast and your regular social media interaction always shows that you've done a lot of research on food. So how this thing, two very different diversified things, how do they merge?
See, I think people have sometimes I think software engineers are to be blamed for creating this image that once you're furiously busy in your computer, that you won't have time for anything else, that you'll completely only you will not do cooking, you will not do eating, you'll be completely involved in that. While forgetting fundamentally that the reason we invented the computer is to give us more free time. right? Because what would have taken a bank a half day to settle accounts that's why bank branches used to close in the afternoon back in the day before computerization came, to where you can do it in 5 minutes at the end of the day. So the bank is open all through the day, right? The goal of computer and software is to give you more free time. It is not to take away your time. And sometimes people forget that. That should be the goal, right? So my goal of being in software is so that I can do things more efficiently, quicker, to create more free time for me to focus on food and focus on music and focus on these other more important value-adding things. And use software and AI and data and all of that as ways to enrich the other things that I'm doing, not just do software for software's sake, right? So that should be the goal of the fundamental problem with devices like this is that the goal of this device must be to help you when you need it and not make you addicted to it all the time.
Yeah,
Right? That
so
should
true.
be what it is. Right?
I think that is
The
very
goal,
much required, actually.
Where does it save you time? Because one click of a button, you can speak to someone 1,000 kilometers away. That's where it saves you time. Earlier, you had to write a letter, you had to do telegram, all that, right? Now, you can get on a video chat and quickly communicate something important to someone, meet your parents and all of that. That is where it's the productivity benefit. Where it is not, is that these algorithms and these devices send you notifications and they like constantly make you think, okay, who has hit like on my post, who has left an angry comment, who has replied to my post on WhatsApp, and you've now become dependent on it like a cigarette or like a drug addict, right? Yeah. Yes.
Wow. So interesting to know. I have some rapid
Sure.
fire for you. Some questions are, very short answers.
Sure.
Eating, maybe here you can
Sure.
answer in yes or no.
Yeah.
Eating in silver vessel, curd and rice combo makes you sharper.
No.
No.
My cookware material makes no difference on nutritional health. Okay. People are overestimating that. Yeah.
Cooking in a microwave or cooking on stove?
Depends on what you're doing. If you're reheating food, always use microwave. It will cause the least loss of water-soluble vitamins. Reheating on the stove will damage more vitamin B and C.
Okay, good. Fortified food or the combos of the foods that are traditionally invented?
As much as possible traditional combinations. Fortify only if your doctor diagnoses you and finds that regardless of a traditional diet, you are deficient, then you fortify. Otherwise, stick with the way your grandmother ate.
Okay, I think it is salt or rock salt.
If you are, stick with iodized salt. Use rock salt and other salts for specialized dishes where the flavor of that salt is important. Do not assume you need to use it for every dish. For day-to-day cooking, use iodized salt or do not risk iodine deficiencies, especially if you're vegetarian, especially if you do not live close to the sea. Do not risk it. It's way too dangerous. We solved this problem 100 years ago, so let's not go back in time. Yeah.
Breakfast, would you prefer to have idli or poha?
In my case, neither. I prefer to have something that's more higher protein, but if at all, I will prefer high protein idli. In fact, I've been now experimenting with replacing urad dal with soybean, which again ferments, it's also a dal, and gets you idli that's twice as much protein and tastes as good. In fact, tastes better. And also change the ratio of the rice to, most people use a 4:1 ratio of rice to dal. It's not very healthy. You should try and make it with 1:1 or 2:1. It'll be a little bit more denser, but it'll be a healthy idli.
Wow. Mood buster for Ashok is music or cooking in the kitchen?
Both, and sometimes, in fact, I'm somebody who likes combining things. In fact, during the pandemic, I used to put out cooking videos on YouTube. And for the dish I'm making, I would then compose and perform a song from that particular language or state, right? So when I made would make some Punjabi dish, then I would perform a Punjabi song and then mix that and then do that. So as I said, I think you can you can find anything to do mindfully that can completely de-stress you. It does not have to be music or cooking or anything. Do what works for you. For some people, it's yoga. Some people, it's reading, right? For some people, it's actually socializing. That also works, yeah.
So, yeah, when it comes to socializing, like I think we missed out on one point. I think we just touch base again on that. Regarding, I think alcohol is, of course, it is banned in Gujarat.
Yes.
There is lot of controversy about alcohol. So, I think your insight on it is also very important here.
I think I will again quote actual experts, particularly Dr. Abby Phillips and other liver specialists that I follow. Evidence is very clear. There is no benefit to alcohol. It is only bad. Okay? There is no safe amount of alcohol. The smallest amount of alcohol will damage your health. Okay? But then, okay, as risks that we take, right, obviously, by living in a city, you're breathing polluted air. Of course, you're harming yourself, right? By living in a village, you're breathing cleaner air. You're going to be better, right? Like that, when we do stressful work, we lose out on sleep. All of these things are so. It's not like we can lead perfectly 100% perfect lives. And sometimes your job role, and if you're in sales, you might need to network with people. Somewhere you have to socialize with people. You might want to have a drink or two. So the point is not to say that it's zero or nothing, but you remember this, right? You have to treat it like you're treating smoking, right? It is bad for your health. No amount of alcohol is good for you. It is far worse for women than it is for men because they have a far smaller ability to break down alcohol in their livers. So, as a general rule, I would say absolutely, if it is possible to avoid, it's best to avoid it.
Thank you for the advice. I think all of you are taking it.
Yeah.
And here, on the closing note, I would just like to know how does your day start and end?
Remember the point I made about, do not follow influencers blindly. I think it should apply to me also. I don't want people to somehow listen to what I do and assume that somehow that's the right way to do anything. We're all unique. And you can be healthy or unhealthy on a wide range of habits, wide range of foods, wide range of lifestyles. Right? So keep that in mind. And on a purely personal note, I'm someone who actually does not eat breakfast. So I've been for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing the 16-hour sort of intermittent fast. So I eat like 8 p.m. is my dinner, and then my next meal is next day noon time, right, around lunchtime, right? Again, there is the evidence for that is mixed, but it's helped me personally, but it doesn't mean that it'll work for others. And I also know I've seen data that it does not work well for women. More 12 to 13 hours works better than 16 hours is probably headache inducing for a lot of women and so on. So I don't eat breakfast, so it allows me to just focus on eating whatever I want during lunch and dinner. What I find is that when I'm in fasted state, I tend to be sharper. So I keep a lot of the harder problem solving things in the morning half when I'm hungry and I'm not like, because after eating, once the sugar crashes after you eat, you will feel drowsy, right? So I keep the more non-value adding activities like sending emails and all that in the second half of the day. I regularly take in between breaks to sometime maybe play a musical instrument and so on, just as a de-stressing thing. I try and do 5 days of the week weight training. So it can vary. Sometimes I try and do it in the just early afternoon, or if the schedule doesn't permit it, later in the evening after work, and sometimes in the morning if it. So I don't break my head about what is the right time to do all of this. But the goal is to try and do 5 times a day, 5 times a week weight training. And again, I use apps there to make sure that every time I do it, I am lifting more weight or more volume, right? Because I think that's how you kind of keep your muscle challenged, if you will, and so on. So that is that. Sleep, I would say I could do better, of course. I mean, I try and get about, I would like to get about 8 to 9 hours of sleep, but it practically ends up being 6 to 7 hours. could definitely do better on that. But yeah, so that's broadly what I do. But again, given that my schedule is often disrupted by a lot of international travel, so that actually makes it challenging. So I might sometimes have to suspend my skipping breakfast and all that, especially if I'm like flying and I'm sitting in a flight for 15 hours. Right? It's just impossible not to eat when they're serving food to everyone else. It's just impossible, right? They say, okay, fine, just bring me something, right? So, but yeah, other than that, I try and eat, I try and get 100 grams of protein a day, which relatively easy if you are not vegetarian. So I'm not vegetarian, so it is relatively easy for me to get. But even despite that, in the nature of Indian cooking, I still end up consuming a fair amount of at least 30 to 40 grams of protein in the form of whey as a supplement. Because it's just impractical to get 100 grams from food in an Indian setting. Right? Because we don't eat that much, right? And so you can get 60 grams from food and then 40 grams from whey from supplementation.
Wow. Thank you. It was very interesting, very enlightening, and I'm sure you all are going to have a very brainstorming session after seeing this podcast. It's going to improve all of your life, clear all the myths. Do put in your comments and do let us know if you have any queries, and we can come up with the solution in our next podcast. Till then, thank you so much, Ashok. It was wonderful having you here. Thank you. Masala Lab is the page you all need to follow, and let us all have a healthy lifestyle together. Thank you. This is Preeti Thakkar signing off from WSC Baatein. See you all soon.